Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Create the Ripple podcast. I'm your host, Candice Smiley. Here we trust the ningle and we tell the truth. This is a podcast. We are looking to have conversations that matter, conversations that take courage to engage in, where we cut through the noise that exists online to bring you incredible content, amazing speakers, and stories to inspire you to live your best, listen to yourself, and tell the truth of who you are and who you just might become. Well, welcome to another episode of the Create the Ripple podcast. I am your host, Candice Smiley, and my guests today, well, they're pretty impressive women. And so they are actually women who worked with Oprah. So I'm having a bit of a fangirl moment, to be completely honest with you. And what a pleasure it's going to be to share conversation with them today. So these two women, Amy and Nancy Harrington, they're sisters. They go apparently by the royal we. They have founded the Passionistas project out of a deep desire to empower women around the world. Both co-founders walked away from high-profile jobs in Hollywood to work together. Amy was the vice president of visual effects and post-production for all feature films at Warner Bros., working on movies like The Matrix and Space Jam. Very cool. Who doesn't remember Space Jam? Nancy left the ad agency where she created the Academy Award campaigns for Miramax. Now, Amy and Nancy shine a light on the positive stories of women on the Passionistas Project podcast. They have conducted more than 60 one-on-one oral histories for the interview for the Television Academy Foundation, including in-depth conversations with Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Ed O'Neill, Danny DeVito, and many more. At the Emmys and other press events, Amy and Nancy have chatted with many stars, including Rita Moreno, Lily Tomlin, Laverne Cox, Deepak Chopra, Carl Burnett, and many others. They've also produced interviews for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, including a sit-down with Mick Jagger. They were handpicked by OWN to be part of the VIP Digital Press Corps, covering Oprah's life class during Winfrey's tour of the U.S. and Toronto. Amy and Nancy founded the Passionistas Project in 2018, and through their podcast, subscription box, and events, they strive to inspire women to follow their passions and join voices in the fight for equality for all. For more information, of course, we're going to have all of their links down in the show notes. Without any further ado, let's get into my interview with Nancy and Amy. Thanks for listening. Ladies, again, I'm so excited that we get to hang out. As usual, my listeners know that there's usually a pre-chat. And so we've got some great energy and chemistry flowing. So I want to jump right in. And normally I make my guests share their bio. I did a little bit of that beforehand. I'm sure we'll weave that in today. But I am really, really curious because you two had incredible high-powered careers, like dream careers. And then you pivoted. And now you're doing something that is just full of passion and purpose. And I am curious what the inspiration was behind that. Like, what was the light bulb that went on and why did you guys do that? Because I'm always curious about that moment where you're like, I am going in this direction and now I'm going to go a different direction, because I'm pretty famous for those. And a lot of people looking in are always like, what? Why? And so I would love it if we can just jump right in and start there.
I wouldn't say it was a light bulb moment. I would say it was more of a dimmer switch that we kept
nudging.
We both were in really high pressure Hollywood careers. Amy was the vice president of post-production and visual effects for all of Warner Brothers feature films. And I was doing Academy Award campaigns for Miramax films. And so we were both working crazy hours, really stressed. And we both wanted to leave. We both were ready for something new, but we didn't exactly know what that was. We were working with a friend on a project. We sort of used that as our excuse to leave our jobs because we had something that we were working on. We like to say we held hands, Thelma and Louise style, jumped off the cliff.
That's the energy I'm getting. That was, as I was reading the bio, I was like, they just grabbed hands and were like, we're going to do it. And I was like,
we went rogue.
Yeah. And then we meandered for a little while. We did a bunch of different projects, had a few companies, had a few partnerships. We landed at a job together where we were doing pop culture content for another company. And that was a great job, but it folded after a couple of years. And that's when we really were like, all right, let's do this for ourselves. And we started Pop Culture Passionistas. So that was the first, I would say, impetus towards like, we got to do this on our own for ourselves. So we started our own website. We started doing celebrity interviews. We got all sorts of clients, including the Television Academy and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So we got to do all these amazing, really cool celebrity things. Then that dimmer switch started happening again. And we were like, we really wanted to do something more. I mean, we always come from a very positive perspective of, fangirls, we didn't do like gossipy celebrity stuff, but we really wanted to do something a little more meaningful. And I would say the light bulb moment then was probably the Me Too movement and Time's Up. We were hearing all of these stories about women that needed to be told, but they were horribly depressing and sad. And we wanted to tell the positive, uplifting, inspiring stories of women. So we started a podcast called the Passionistas Project, and then that just grew from there.
I love this. And thank you so much for sharing those bits and pieces, because if I look at my own life and the lives of other women I know who really want to make a difference and have an impact, there's often a lot of starts and stops and oops, that was supposed to go differently. And it's really easy, I think, sometimes to lose faith in yourself because you're like, well, I thought this was the right decision. And we're not really the women who do things, just part-time. We're like, we're going to do this. And so we start a lot of things. And then sometimes we're like, oh, I guess I need to wrap this one up because it's not quite where I want it to go. And I've always felt like that was a good thing, that I can, refresh, restart, try again. I feel like I've learned so much. And so when I look back, I'm like, yeah, but this led to this, and then this led to that. And now I'm here and it feels great. And I don't know, maybe in 5 years, I'll feel something else. Like you said, that dimmer switch. And so I'm just going to say big kudos, because I know there's a lot of women out there that have probably heard it, especially from some of those personality types, that they know what they're going to be when they're like 5 years old. That was never me. I still don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. And I'm like close to 40 now. And I'm like, maybe I'll figure it out by the time I'm 45. Probably not. I'll just keep trying to enjoy my life. So tell me more.
What was interesting for us is that we both were so passionate about what we were doing. I definitely, from high school to Warner Brothers, knew I wanted to be in the entertainment industry. Like there was no doubt I was going to move to New York and move to California. Like I thought, and then being at Warner Brothers in the system, people don't leave that system once you're in it. So I really did think I was going to be there forever. But what I've learned along the way is it's okay if your passion changes. And if somebody had told me when I was 15 or 30 that this is what Nancy and I are both introverts. If someone said, you'll be interviewing people for a living, you'll be spending your day having conversations with people, it would be like, nah, I'm not doing that. But when we finally realized, and luckily we realized it simultaneously, like, oh, we love doing this. And now that we do it to promote women, like, I can't imagine doing anything else. And our passions have changed. And I think it's really important for people to understand that that's okay. We mentor a lot of, college interns. We're like, you think you know what you want to do right now, but keep your mind open.
That's so cool. So I'm curious. So the Passionista Project, you've got a subscription box. I want you to tell me about that. You've also got the podcast. Of course, we'll have links for people to listen down below. Is that really about telling the story? Tell me about sort of the content that people are going to be listening to when they tune into that.
Yeah, the podcast is the Passionistas Project podcast, and we interview women who are following their passions. We want women to listen to it and be inspired to follow their passions. So, we've talked to everyone from a woman who melts down nuclear weapons to make peace angels, to women who are artists and, make tiny sculptures, or advocates who are out on the streets fighting for the homeless. It's just a really wide variety of women who are following their passions, whatever that is. It doesn't necessarily mean they make a lot of money. It's not about that. It's about defining success on their own terms. It's incredibly inspiring. Every single one of these women just has a story that blows us away every time we talk to them. So
in interviewing all those women, we started to realize there were these amazing women with products. And, women-owned businesses get so much less funding than men. They don't get the attention that male-owned businesses do. So that's when we decided to start the subscription box at the encouragement of our friend Sashi Chandran from Tea Drops, who's an incredible entrepreneur. And we started to sell a subscription box full of products from women-owned businesses, but we also tell the stories of those women. So when you open the box, you may get a bag of tea, but you also learn about Sashi and her story and can be inspired by that. So we're bringing the interview concept from the podcast and from our past into the subscription box as well, to give it another layer rather than just a box full of stuff,
And I love that. It's one of my favorite pieces about doing this podcast. And I like always asking people, to share their stories. And usually I get people saying, nobody's ever asked me that question before. And I was like, yeah, I'm not really interested in the story you tell on every other podcast. I want to know who you are. Like, tell me the why behind that, because that's intriguing to me. And it's quite fun to do that. I'm curious. Favorite book?
Oh, my goodness. My favorite book has always been, and it seems cliche now because it's become so popular, but I read it in 1986 when it came out, was The Handmaid's Tale. And I'm a huge fan of Margaret Atwood. I love that book. It's always been my favorite book through the years whenever anyone asks me that. And now it seems like, oh yeah, sure. Everyone knows that book, but that's my favorite. I love Margaret Atwood. I think she's an amazing writer.
The first one that popped into my head was A Prayer for Owen Meany.
Oh, I've not heard of
the John Irving book. He wrote The World According to Garp, but Prayer for Owen Meany. Been a long time, but it's a good one. Don't watch the movie, read the book.
Don't watch the movie. Isn't that how it usually is, right? It's like I need to go out and get the book. I love that. So around that, as I was prepping for this interview, and this is very different for me because usually I know exactly where I want it to go. But today I really felt like one of the questions I wanted to ask you two ladies was, is there something on your mind and your heart that you want to talk about today? Because I would love to engage in that conversation with you.
I think the thing that's been on my mind just consistently since we started this, and it just kind of grows stronger every day, is the importance of a community of women. Again, Nancy and I came, I think especially, Nancy came from the freelance world where she worked in kind of her own isolated cocoon. I came from corporate entertainment, studio side of filmmaking and television production, where I was often the only woman in the higher up meetings. And so we were never assimilated to other women, working with other women. I had women that I worked with who were great, and they were mostly on my team. But when it came to being in higher powered meetings, I was tended to be the only woman. So we weren't really trained in the world of collaborating with other women. So when we started the Passionistas project, it was like, okay, we'll interview women. That'll be great. And when you interview celebrities, you have this kind of false connection with people where it's like, oh, I just talked to Julia Louis-Dreyfus for 3 hours and now she's my new best friend. It's like, no, she does not know who you are. But when we started the Passionistas project and started to interview these women, we became really attached to them. And we started to really have these deep connections and relationships, and their successes are ours, in our heart, and their failures crush us. And they started to support us and to look out for us, which is something we never in a million years bargained for. Mm-hmm. And I know that Nancy and I both feel like, to me, the great success of this, however many people listen to the podcast, however many people buy the box, the success of this is the connection we have with the women, and now that they are having with each other, that they'll reach out to us and say, do you know any women who have a farm? And it's like, yeah, we do. We know a female farm. We actually know 2 female farmers. And I don't know how we would make it through the day without this community. One of the women just starred on her first episode of Mayans MC last night, the TV show. And Nancy and I were crawling out of our skin. We were so excited to see her.
I can't wait.
It was the greatest entertainment experience I think I've ever had. Selene Luna, check her out on Mayans MC. And we've done a lot in the entertainment industry. I've never been as excited as I was seeing her on that show last night. And to me, I'm constantly trying to think of ways that we can keep this going to build the community, to give more exposure to the women. So that's kind of what's on my mind.
Yeah. And I don't think it's something that's exclusive to us. I think all women have had that experience through the years where we're taught to become part of the boys' network and be one of the guys. And the women are our competition because we were all fighting for that same seat at the table. And I think through the years and through our experience with this Passionistas project, we're all learning that there's more than one seat at the table. Or I think, as one of our Passionistas said, like, make the table bigger. There's room for everyone. And I think that experience of community is really important right now in this today's world for women to just support each other and lift each other up.
Yeah, I can remember that sense, because certainly my masculine side was way more overdeveloped. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago when I did some deep healing work and finally reconnected with my feminine that it just totally changed the game. And now it's like, sure, I have a seat at the table and I'm going to pull up another couple of chairs because we can make more room, right? Let's make more room. And that was a really interesting thought. I think it's so interesting because I still run into really kind and amazing men who still don't see that there's this gap in so many different areas, which just makes me go, are you living on the moon? Like, I understand it. And recently I interviewed a couple of amazing women who were not the same skin tone as me, which showed me that the gap is even bigger for a lot of other groups. And I was like, wow, I had no idea this was a challenge. And it's just, like you said, this community, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And like you, I love the podcast and I do it because I want to interview and the tagline, of course, is trust the niggle, tell the truth, right? So what do you know you should be doing or could be doing? What's that dimmer switch, right? Like you said, that could you turn it up a bit? But the telling the truth part, because we're not very good at that, first of all, to ourselves. And then certainly out loud, whether it's saying things like, hey, that comment was offside, or, hey, this is a difference. And I know that for myself, like, I literally dropped the ball. It happened yesterday. I was out of integrity with myself in my work, hadn't said anything yet because I didn't know how to say it. That's half the problem some of the times, and dropped the ball. And I was like, well, I know what this is. It's because I haven't figured out how to talk about, and it's just, I want more women to know that. It's because as soon as I tell that story, I'm getting what you guys are doing right now. There's not, been there, got the t-shirt. So I love what you guys are saying about that in terms of, sharing the community.
Yeah. And we're learning every day. You were talking about the gap and people not being aware of it. That's part of what we're trying to do is raise awareness of things like that. For example, again, not to talk about Selene Luna all the time, although she's one of our favorite persons on the planet. We didn't know until we interviewed her that the pay gap with disabled people is insane. And there are rules on the books in many states that it is perfectly legal to pay people with disabilities less than minimum wage, and that the majority of disabled people live in poverty. That's been one of our missions since we met Selene, is to bring awareness to the disability community, because it's just shocking to me that we live in a world where that still exists.
It's also one of the reasons that we started the Power of Passionistas Summit, which is an annual event that we do where we bring in intersectional women from different communities. And all we do is give them the stage. We'll introduce the event, but we do not sit and talk about what Black Lives Matter is and why it's important. We don't talk about what it's like to be a woman with a disability. We don't preach what other people's experiences are. And so we have had our eyes opened by so many women from the LGBT community, the AAPI community, the Indigenous women, trans women, women with disabilities. And what we do is we have them have conversations. It's less formal than a typical conference. It's more storytelling and roundtable conversations. And, to sit back and to hear these women share their experiences, it's impossible to walk away from that, not wanting to do something, even a small thing, like our friend Santina Muha, who lives in a wheelchair, was like, if you're at a restaurant and there's a bathroom that's not accessible for everybody, even if you don't need it to be, say something to the restaurant. It's like, of course. Yeah. Why would we not do that? There's small, everyday things that we are getting reminded of. And, this year we're going to do it so that the communities are more intertwined, talk about a broader theme, talk about the power of knowledge and how does that affect the disability community? How does that affect the LGBTQ community? Because we can sit here and give our opinion of it all day long, but Very few people get the opportunity to talk about their own issues. A lot of people talk about everybody else's issues. So
it's so much easier
like
to talk about everybody else's issues, right?
Totally.
It makes some personal accountability and responsibility, maybe some, some transparency if you're going to talk about your own.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you brought that up.
Well, ladies, I could spend hours talking to you, but I really do want the listeners to go and check out what you ladies are up to. It's a huge part of the reason I do this podcast is from the time I was very young, just seemed to be the one connecting groups that would often not be aware of who else was out there and doing amazing things. So thank you first and foremost for coming on the show today.
We're really grateful to be here. We really appreciate you having us. We are open arms. If you are tolerant and accepting and caring about other people, then you're welcome to be a part of our community. So feel free to.
Our main mission in life is to promote what women are doing. So if you have something interesting that you're doing, you want to spread the word, let us know. We interview women all the time. We post about them on social media. So
put them in our subscription
product
box.
and want to be in the box, let us know.
Yeah. No, my producer, Angel, here's her shout out on this show, already said, you should talk about the box. Get into the box. I was like,
definitely.
Yes.
Let us know.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, ladies. It was a pleasure to hang out with you again today. And to my listeners, please go and follow and see what these ladies are up to. As you can tell, they're a hoot. They are just like you and me. And I absolutely cannot wait to see what the future holds for us. So thank you so much, everybody.